kind of short of breath. But this is something that my oldest son, Samuel, has wanted me to do for a long time. And I'm sort of hesitant as to how to get started. I've been putting him off and stalling for a long time. But anyhow, this sort of review or go back to some of the things that I remember in my early life. I like to say that I had a wonderful family. My mother and father, and my brothers, and I had one sister. I had two sisters, but my youngest sister died when she was 4 years old. That was about 3 years before I was born. Let me see, I'm getting mixed up, but anyhow, she died about 1917, and I was born in 1915. I was born December 22nd, 1915. And the neighborhood, the place where I lived, was at Greenwood Avenue, over in Richmond, Indiana. And it was a beautiful neighborhood, trees, sort of it was sort of like being out in the country, like. It lived on a country road. There was a dirt road. There were all kinds of little creatures around, like rabbits and squirrels and birds. We had a variety of birds all over the place, and it was beautiful, and it was inspiring. It's one of the reasons why I think I've become a musician, because of the atmosphere of my home, the outdoors. Well, my brothers, I had 3 brothers, and they were sort of a variety of activities. I mean, they like to be outdoors, like to play games, like to go hunting, go fishing, all that sort of thing. And then my sister was, when she was born, she was the new baby, and my other sister had passed away when she was 4 years old. So this little girl that I'm speaking about now, she was born in 1919. So I was 4 years old when she was born, and she sort of become the darling of our family, because we didn't have another girl until she came. Of course, I didn't know it. They didn't mean a lot to me, because I wasn't aware of the gender and girls, and how many brothers, how many sisters. I was too young to sort of get that into my focus. But anyhow, I remember that she took over. If I had anything special to play with, after she become old enough to walk around and talk, well, she would take it away from me. It was hers, she said. So I wouldn't argue with her. I just let her have her way. And all through the years after that, she was the pet of the family. And my father, Samuel James Hopkins, was a railroad man. He worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad when he was starting. I think he started there when he was about 17 or 18 years old. And he married my mother, and she was Mary Audrey Davis, and she became Mary Audrey Hopkins. My mother, she was a beautiful, beautiful lady, sweet and lovely, and she was very family orientated. She always cared for us and took good care of us, and we had the best of everything as far as what we could afford. I mean, the meals, our food, our diet, and everything. But we lived in a neighborhood where there were just about 50% of the neighborhood was white, 50% of it was black. And we lived on the black folks lived on one side of the street, and the white folks lived on the opposite side of the street. We got along just fine, no problem. And I do remember that I had a young friend who was the only child in his family, so occasionally he would come down and we would play, he and I would play together, because he didn't have any sisters or brothers. And then the age difference in my brothers, they were all older than me. I think the youngest of my brothers was 5 years older than me, and then the other two, about 2 years apart, going on up to about, the oldest boy was about 8 years older than me, and then my next brother was about 6 years older than me, and of course down to me, where I was born in 1915. So they were born, I think they were born in 1906 and 1908, 1910, and 1915. Well, my brother next to me, somehow or other, he was learning how to play clarinet, had clarinet lessons. Dad gave him clarinet lessons, and so, but he was more interested in sports. So he would take his clarinet and prop it up against a tree and take his lesson money and go to show. So finally quit practicing, and he got disinterested in playing a musical instrument. So he just put the clarinet in the closet, one of the closets. And I had a buddy of mine. We've become very good friends. His name was James Alexander. And he was about my age. Oh, within a month or two, our age was about the same. And he and I sort of had a lot of daydreams. We did a lot of that daydreaming, and we used to think about what we wanted to do in life. First, we were going to go to have an automobile. We were crazy about automobiles, and we were very interested in trying to know all the names of all the different cars that were made during that period. So we decided we wanted to manufacture our own car. We were going to call it the Barling Bomber, a steam operated machine. But that never came about because we were just daydreaming. Then finally we decided we were going to be musicians, and so he took up trumpet and I took up sax. I took up sax. Ordinarily I would have been a trombone player, but Dad told me if I wanted an instrument to go look in the closet and get this clarinet out. So I got it out and I started taking clarinet lessons. And after a few clarinet lessons, I began to play it well enough to get a music book, elementary clarinet music book, and started learning how to read music. I more or less was self-taught from the standpoint that I only had a few clarinet lessons from a teacher, so I practiced quite a bit and got a good sound, a good tone on my instrument, on this clarinet. And I then started to get the idea about playing a saxophone, because I had two uncles that were playing in about a five-piece band, and they both played saxophone, and they had this band of piano, drums, and two saxes, and the piano player's wife sang. She was a singer, so they went out on jobs, and I used to listen to them rehearse, and I'd like to play saxophone. So I was told that since I was on clarinet, that it would not be very difficult for me to sort of teach myself how to play saxophone. So this took me up to about on and off. I was doing various things in my activities, like cutting grass and earning money, and picking wild greens and selling them by the basket and earning $1.50 or $1, some change or something like that. And then I finally got the idea of cutting grass. My buddy and I, who was very close to me, just like a brother, James Alexander, we decided we would go out together and solicit grass cutting jobs. So we did that. And then finally, we had some more friends of our age, Crazy Owens and James Speed. Crazy Owens played drums. And he started out playing drums by practicing on his mother's tin pans and pots and kettles and all that. And he got the idea that he could be a drummer, so he developed into a very good drummer. Then another friend, James Speed, he played saxophone and he played tenor sax and alto, and also he played clarinet. So we had two saxophones, and James Alexander played the trumpet. We had two saxes, one trumpet, and then later on, as we go down with this story, why we had a friend that played trombone, so he joined the band. So we had four horns and two rhythm. We had just a piano, didn't have a bass, just a piano player and a drummer. And we become very, very good at even at our young age. By the time we were about 14 to 15 years old, we were playing commercial jobs, and we sounded very good because we learned how to play in tune and learned how to read well. And I used to write all the music. I wrote all the reams. And we used to impress a lot of older musicians because we were pretty skilled in reading our notes and all the rudiments of music. We didn't miss too many phrases. We played accurately and played in tune, so we had a good sound. So I wrote everything in four-part harmony, and so it had a big sound, and I began to catch on and listen to Duke Ellington's music, his records and everything, and occasionally be lucky enough to catch a broadcast when he was broadcasting from the Cotton Club in New York. So I just become absolutely fascinated by jazz, the music that these bands played and broadcast. And so we practiced, we rehearsed every day and become very good at it. And somebody heard us, and I don't know, can't remember just how, who did sort of promote us to playing a job in out of town. So as we got a little older now, we're around about the same age now, about 14, 15, 16, 17, somewhere down there. We got this job in Hampton, Ohio, in a nightclub down there. It's called Spotlight Cafe. And the guy that owned the nightclub was he was a millionaire back actually in his Depression times, because I'm skipping around, and I've come up to the time that I'm talking about now. It was around in the early 30s, about 1932, 33, and just about the time I was ready to graduate from high school. I graduated from high school at 18, but I stayed out of high school a whole year because I was way ahead of my class. I had a sort of deviating a little bit from what I was talking about the music to get on to explain about my schooling. I was very fortunate and had very little problem with my school subjects like English and mathematics and history and all those subjects. I never had to, I don't recall ever doing a lot of homework. I just caught it right on the spot. Just as assignments were made, I was able to still play my music, and I guess I was a little bit ahead of the class as far as the knowledge of being able to apprehend what the teachers would assign to us for our lessons, our homework. So anyhow, we went to Hampton, Ohio. We called the band Sammy Hopkins and his Five Spirits of Rhythm. That was a 6-piece band. And we went to Hampton, Ohio, and played in this place. Like I said, it was called the Spotlight Cafe. And the man that owned the place his name was Shelby Jones. He was Kentuckian. And he was very nice, and he was a very good businessman. He took care of us, but of course during the Depression, now this is back about 32, when we first started working for him, and we worked for him 2 successive summers, 32 and 33. Pardon me. And during that time, we become more and more skill on our instruments, and we sounded better as a group. And it was there was a walkathon. That back in those days, in order to get more business or have a novel way of getting the attention of the public, somebody thought of the idea to have what they call a walkathon. That was the whole plan of the walkathon, was to see how long dance couples, a man and a wife, or a man and his partner, could stay on the floor without being exhausted. And they would give you maybe 20 minutes to rest out of every hour. And they would keep a record of it, and sometimes that would go on for several days, and then finally whoever won, who stayed the longest, and then going by the rules and regulations that they had for the contest, they would win $1,000. And this was being held at a place, sort of a dance hall called the Jeff's Gardens in Hampton, Ohio. And the band that was playing there in Jeff's Gardens was Zach White and his Chocolate Bowl Brummels. That was a big band. It was a big band that was beyond our ages. They were, I guess, anywhere from say 20 to 30 or 40 years of age. 17-piece band, and they were all very good musicians. We never tried to classify or rate ourselves as with those musicians, but yet they were impressed with us. Excuse me. And we never got a chance to hear them, only on their broadcast. So they broadcast every night. But after they got to and closed their place down, their work being finished for the night, they would come by this Spotlight Cafe where we were playing. They would stand there and watch us, stand in front of our band, and watch us as if we were superstars, as if we were superior to them. They stood and just listened to us, and they didn't seem very interested in what we were playing and how we played and how well we could play. So then, as that went along, night after night, one night the boss called me over and said, Sammy, called me Sammy. Sammy, I think that you could, if you had a larger band, more men, that you could have as good a band as Zach White. And Zach had a terrific band. He was one of the best black bands in the Middle West, or in the Midwest as they called it. And he said, I will furnish the money, and you get the musicians. I'll furnish you the money to operate this size of band, about 15 to 16, 17-piece band. I said, well, I'll have to think that over because I'm not sure whether I could handle that type of a proposition at my age, and we were all very young. So I thought it over, and I never realized or had much vision for the future, because during that time, and most bands that they were able to, they would hire big bands of that size. They would be so well organized, they would have a manager, a road manager, what they call a road manager, who would travel with the band and who would take care of the bookkeeping and the finances and all the arrangements where the band had to have to be successful out, because they would travel on the road doing one-nighters or playing clubs by the week or playing theaters by the week, and they would have a manager. And I never thought of that. I guess I was just too young to realize the business possibilities of going into a little farther up on the idea of having a big band. So I told him that I couldn't manage it. I didn't think I could be capable of managing that size of band. Excuse me. So anyhow, I went on just as we were, and we finished out 2 years. Well, the first year I went down there, and then we came back the next summer vacation time, and after that I was getting close to graduation time at school, but then the principal called me in one day and says, Samuel Hopkins? I said, yes. He said, well, come in my office. I said, have a seat. I'm busy right now, but I will be with you just as soon as I get this taken care of. And he was doing something on his desk, and so I sat there and waited. And finally, he turned around and said, well, Samuel, I don't know if you were aware, but you've been doing very well in school, scholastically. I just sort of said, I do, or whatever, you know. So anyhow, he said, you have the highest grades of any Negro student. And in those days, they didn't say black, they said Negro or colored. He said, you have the highest grades of any Negro colored student in the history of this school. And the name of the school is Martin High School, Martin Senior High School. And it was about, I think it was, would go back to, it was established about somewhere in the late 80s, about 18 and probably 1880, 81 or 2. And then what we're speaking about now, when he was talking to me, this was 1933. This is 1933. Because I remember I had another year to graduate. And he told me that I had the highest grades of any, I'll just say, black student in the history of the school. And he said, what are your plans? Are you going to college, or what do you want to be when you come out of high school? And I said, well, I think I want to be a jazz musician, a musician who plays in big dance bands, or large dance bands, playing jazz music exclusively. And I had listened to Duke Ellington, I'd heard Cab Calloway, and I'd heard Benny Goodman, and I'd heard all those big bands back in those days, and they were quite successful. But the black bands were not as successful as the white bands, because they didn't have the market, they didn't have the places to play. The white bands had nightclubs where you very seldom ever saw a black band. And they had the theaters, and they had the best booking dates. And black bands were playing and traveling by in about take about three or four automobiles to move them 15 or 16 piece band, move them over the roads. And so, but the white bands would have a big bus, like a Greyhound bus, and they traveled in much better situations than we had for a black band. So anyhow, I still wanted to be that type of musician who played in big bands, and I hadn't thought about going to college, to be a lawyer and doctor. I hadn't thought about that. Well, one reason why I hadn't, because there was no, in Richmond, Indiana at that time, there was very few black professional people because of the Depression. This was in the beginning of the I think the worst depression that we've ever had, started back with the stock market crash in 1928. And then from then on till the start of the Second World War, it was a very, very, very sad kind of a situation with people. They were starving, they didn't have work, and families didn't have proper food or clothes, and it was just a bad situation. It was the worst depression that we've ever experienced in this country. So I had made it up in my mind that I wanted to be a jazz musician and just play and travel and all that. And I never worried about how much money I was going to make or that sort of thing. I was writing music, learning to arrange, and that was coming along pretty well. And then I was also doing well on my horn. I was practicing and becoming more skilled as time went by, because the old saying is that practice makes perfect, and that was true. I realized that, so I began to practice and write music and rehearse with the boys till we had a good experience. So I finally started to become a little more experienced when we played more jobs out of the city of Richmond and played around different places, and we become a little more known, better known as a good band, and even though we were very young. So, and also in doing that and helping us as musicians, as a band, a small band ourselves, I become known to other large bands, and they begin to get in touch with me, send me letters or call me and wanted me to join their band. So I thought about that, and so finally I said, well, I'm going to finish high school. So I had another year in high school until the principal, and I go back now to where the principal had me in his office. He said I had the highest grades of any black student in the history of the school, and he asked me what my plans were, and I told him I was just going to be a jazz musician. He said, well, you have a chance here for 2 scholarships, and he named the organizations that were offering these scholarships to black students, and I think one of them was Phyllis Wheatley. That was a black, sort of a black organization that, and something like Urban League. I don't know I can't remember the other organization. But anyhow, I asked him how much was the scholarship. He said they were $100 each. And then I got to thinking, I said, well, that's not too much money. I think I still would not be impressed to give up my music to try to go to college. And like I said, there weren't any black people. The doctors, they may have had about 1 doctor, and maybe 1 or 2 lawyers, and they weren't making too much money out of the profession that they were in. So I thought I was on the right track, so I stayed with my music. So I stayed, come back to school. I stayed out of school a whole year, and I came back to graduate with my class because he told me, the principal told me, his name was Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein told me that I could graduate a whole year ahead of my class if I wanted to, but just by getting a few more credits, I would be qualified to graduate a whole year. And I didn't see where that would be much fun because I wouldn't be with my class. So I decided to stay out of school a whole year, came back the next year, and then graduated. Well, after I graduated, I then went to I had played with this band out of Cincinnati, Zach White and his Chocolate Bowl Brown, in 1933, and so I got sick. I had sort of a weakness towards having quinsy, tonsillitis. I didn't have my tonsils out. So, but my mother had me come home from that band, and that was during the summer vacation well, it's after I graduated from high school, and I graduated from high school in 1934. So I came back home after a short stint with that band because of this illness, and then when I got well, they wanted me to come on back to the band. Mr. White did, Zach White. But I decided to go, instead of going with his band, back to his band, I decided to go with a young guy who was quite a fine musician, and it was a chance for me to learn more about arranging because he was an excellent arranger, and he had been known all out to New York and out east and for his arranging, and also he was a trombonist. And he was a very fine trombone player. So he said he heard about me and he wanted to talk to me, so we talked, and he gave me an opportunity to come to Indianapolis, Indiana with his band that he was organizing over in Indianapolis. So I went over there in Indianapolis and joined his band, and he taught me, just like going to school, taught me about arranging more, where years before I was arranging more or less on my own ideas and just sort of teaching myself how to arrange, it being that I could read music, and I knew all the rudiments of music and knew how to write the notes and the symbols. So he showed me all the fine points, and I've become a very good arranger. And then I wrote about maybe 15 or 20 arrangements in his organization, in his band, and one day he told me that he was going to leave Indianapolis, and he had an opportunity to go with a band that was playing in Columbus, Ohio, known as Chick Carter and the Dixie Rhythm Boys. And they were a band that was traveling all over the Midwest, and they were very, very good. It was quite an advancement for me to go along with him and join this band also. But he told me that he he would see to it that I had a place in this band, which they did need another saxophone player. So I became one of the saxophone players, and after being with the band for a few days, you might say, it happened that quick, they promoted me to first alto sax, and that meant I was the lead sax. I led the reed section, and I was playing the melody lines on all the phrases of the reed section, and everything was scored, and I was a top reed man. So from there, I played with Chick Carter's Dixie Rhythm Boys band for about 2 years, and then I had a chance to go with another band, and it was a band known also in the Midwest, and it was Jimmy Rachel. Got an odd name, his last name. He spelled it R-A-S-C-H-E-L, and he pronounced it Rachel. So I went with him for about, for 3, 4, 5 months, and then Wheeler Moran, he was the man who was responsible for me coming to Columbus, Ohio. He was a trombone player, and also he was responsible for me advancing and learning how to arrange better. So he got in touch with me. He'd gone to New York, and he'd gone to New York and left Chick Carter and Dick the Rhythm Boys band, and he joined the band that was playing in the Cotton Club in New York. And that was about the time that the composition of the song Stormy Weather came out. And Ethel Waters was the one who introduced it. So he was to join Eddie Mallory, who was married to Ethel Waters. He was to join Eddie Mallory in his Cotton Club band. So he did. And in a matter of a few weeks, he was contacting me and told me that he had a place for me to come and join this band out of the Cotton Club. Well, I was just overwhelmed because they were the top black musicians in all of the whole country. They played with bands like Duke Ellington, Cab Calloway, Benny Moten. They were the top black musicians in this band when they were playing in the Cotton Club in New York, and they were the house band, what they call a house band. So the way I got in that band was because I had this gentleman, Wheeler Moran, or Wheeler Moran, as sometimes he was called. He had carried all his music with him, and included in his music was about 15 or 20 of the arrangements that I had written while being in his band in Indianapolis. So I agreed to come and join his band, join this Eddie Mallory band, who was playing in the Cotton Club. But I joined him in Chicago, and I opened up in the downtown loop, they call it downtown loop in Chicago, at the Palace Theater, which was one of the RKO Keith. It was sort of a chain of theaters that played the biggest vaudeville shows all over the United States. So I joined this band in Chicago in the Palace Theater, there downtown loop, and I did well. They accepted me in the band, and they treated me just like I was a whole family like. And it was a wonderful experience for me. They were a great band. It was one of the finest bands that I'd ever heard, and they played nothing but theater work. They didn't play any dance work. It was just theater after theater, going from Chicago, Detroit, Indianapolis, Cleveland, all over the eastern part of the United States in theaters. So I was able to get a new horn. I needed a new sax. My horn that I had presently at that time had become very worn, and so these people were. I was able to buy a new horn without any money down. This is during the Depression. Now this is 1938, and the music store owner, he bought the horn all the way down to Indianapolis. First, I'm going to go back a little bit. First, I joined the band in Chicago, played in the Palace Theater, downtown Chicago. But my horn was sort of pretty bad shape, so I needed a new horn. So we were, after completing the Chicago engagement at Palace Theater, we went to the Lyric Theater in Indianapolis the very next week. And during that time, I was new in the band. I just had joined the band, so I had to get uniforms, measured up for uniform, 2 uniforms. We had 2 uniforms. So I got measured up for the 2 uniforms. And in the meantime, this was down in Indianapolis, down backstage at the, in a, I guess you'd call it the sort of a lobby for the band, sort of like a living room or something like that. Lobby in the theater. We had our own private section of the theater backstage, and we had these. Each member of the show had their own rooms. We had a vaudeville show. We had comedians. We had tap dancers. We had about 40, including the band. We had about 40 people on that show, and we had separate dressing rooms and all that. So while there, the band leader, Eddie Mallory, this is Eddie Mallory and his band, Cotton Club Band, he had about 3 or 4 instrument people come in and bring alto saxophones for me to try out and get a new instrument. So I had all the saxophones known, and I had a Wurlitzer, not a Wurlitzer, excuse me. I had a Busher sax, a Kahn sax, a Martin sax, and the top of the line, the French Selmer sax. And I chose the French Selmer because it was the best. I didn't have a nickel to put down on buying this instrument. The man said, "Don't worry," says, "you're with Ethel Waters. You'll just pay me, if you just pay me a couple hours every now and then, you'll be okay." And I couldn't believe it. It was almost like a fairy tale. Me getting a brand new instrument. And I think at that time it was $220 for the instrument and case and all. So I bought it. Naturally, I bought it, and at the end of each week, where we gave, I was sending him $2. That's all I paid, $2 a week, and the horn cost $220. So I won't get into that. Don't get into that too much. But anyhow, I managed to pay for the horn, and from that time on, I never played any other instrument, other type but Selmer, French Selmer, and the horns lasted a long time. They were the best made, and right today, now you can't hardly find a saxophone player of any recruit that doesn't have a Selmer. All the saxophone players now, they all play, professionals, all play Selmer saxes. And so I had I've only had, I've had only 2 Selmers in my lifetime. And I've been playing ever since 1938 when I bought that first Selmer. And up to today, this is 1976. No, I'm not, excuse me, I don't mean to say 1976. I was saying that I am 76 years old. This is 1992. From 1938 to 1992, I only had 2 saxophones. But I took good care of them, and periodically I would send them to the Selmer factory in Elkhart, Indiana, and they would renew my horn and go all over it. It would be just like new. So that's the reason I still play the second one that I own, and just by me taking good care of it and sending it to the factory for overhaul jobs. So anyhow, we're now playing in the Lyric Theater in Indianapolis. And during this time, well, of course, there was a lot of discrimination. Black people or colored people or Negroes were not allowed to go in these theaters where we were playing. We couldn't even come in the theater to see a show. This is over in Indianapolis, 1938. They could come in, only way they could see the show if they had somebody, they knew somebody in the show or working at the theater, somebody maybe slip them in backstage, and they could stand backstage and watch the show. But that was not very often they could do that. So you see how much how everything was back in those days. The discrimination was awful. You couldn't get a hotel. You couldn't stay in a hotel you had to have, when you travel like the way we did, we had to travel and go, we knew about rooming houses, or people who were in the business of renting to rooms to show people, because that was a big thing back in those days. Shows were one of the biggest livelihoods for a black musician or entertainer. Like I imagine, like they would look on it. They looked on it as maybe athletes, like football, basketball, baseball players who are out today traveling and playing on these National League, American League, and the NFL football league. They today have, but their accommodations are much better. They can stay in the finest hotels that are available. But back then, you couldn't even get in a hotel, so we had to live in rooming houses. And so, as I was starting to say, the people, if they wanted to see a show, they had to. They were lucky they could maybe get backstage and see a show. So I remember this particular incident. I will never forget it. I was getting fit for my uniform, for the 2 uniforms, and I was also looking at about 5 or 6 different saxophones, all at the same time. And this was between shows, say after the first show. And the first show would start around about 12:30 or 1 o'clock, and in the noonday. So after that show, first show, well, then these people came in to fit me up for uniforms and also to try to sell me a saxophone. Well, during this time, Miss Waters was being interviewed by the Indianapolis newspapers. I think about 3 or 4 different newspapers in Indianapolis. They were interviewing her in this sort of a lobby like backstage, and it was a big room where you could bring your guests or friends could come in, or business people could come in and see the performers back in this lobby like place, a room. So she was being interviewed, and all of a sudden she looked around, and here come 2 comedians. They were black-faced comedians. Now, during those days, back then, the show had regular comedians, but they also had what we call a black-faced comedian. They were people who put on what they call a burnt cork. I guess they burnt the cork, and then they would make you color your face black, coal black, just like coal. And they had to put this stuff on their face, and they called them black-faced comedians. So they came in because they was getting ready for the next show. And Miss Waters says, "Pardon me, gentlemen," talking to the press people, newspaper people. She said, "Excuse me just a minute." And so she didn't stop taking. I want to see these two men, she said. And she didn't stop to take them to another location in the theater. She just started talking to them right there and then in front of everybody. She told them, said, I heard that you had gone to the management of this theater to get some of your friends in to see the show." And so they said, yes, Miss Waters, yes, we did do that. She said, "I want to tell you something. I've got your tickets ready. You're fired." She said, "You are fired, and I've got your tickets ready, and you can go on back to New York, where you come from." So when I work in a theater, I'm the boss. You don't ask nobody for no special favors of any kind. This theater is very precious, and black people cannot come in here. And said, "Now you went to the management and tried to ask them if you could have some of your friends come in." I said, "I want to tell you something. They told you that you'd have to see me. Is that right?" I said, yes, ma'am." So, "Well, I'll tell you something. I'm the boss. When I come in these theaters, and these people, the management or anybody else in this theater, if there's anything we said, they have to come to me and get my okay on it. I am the boss. You understand that?" And they bowed, ducked their heads down and said, "Yes, Miss Waters." She said, "Now, I should send you right on back, because I have your tickets already. On back to New York, because if you can't comply with those rules, you have to leave this show. So they were sort of embarrassed, more than embarrassed. And the newspaper people, their faces turned red. She said, because I don't look up to no, well, I won't say the words, but she said, I don't look up to nobody. They said, the only person I look up to is God Almighty. They said, I'm the boss. And I won't say the words what she called in referring in reference to the management of the theater or anybody else that was so-called a white person. She called him a name, but I won't call him that. I won't put that name in this interview, because it was very embarrassing to. But that's the way Miss Watts was. She was very frank. She didn't bite her tongue about anything, and she was bitterly against discrimination. So we all got the message. So we knew then that if there was anything we wanted pertaining to the theater, or getting into the theater, all that type of thing, she was the boss, and we come to her, not to anybody else. Well, that was just one incident. And so, but then on, everything went smoothly. But the band and the show was terrific. Every show was almost like, say, full to capacity, sold out, you might say. And the people, we would have, they'd book us a year in advance for return engagement. And that's how popular the show was. Of course, she was, at that time, she was the top black Negro woman singer, entertainer. She was the top, the best. And she had this song had just been written, Stormy Weather, and she appeared, that was a big hit in New York down at the Cotton Club, Stormy Weather. And so she had recorded a lot of big hits. And so she was a big woman, so to speak, when it comes out of showbiz. And I had seen, in working with her, I had seen with my own eyes where she had offers to play different theaters all over the world. She went, for instance, like the Palladium in London. She turned it down. And she was offered a tremendous salary to play there, and she turned it down because she was married. She had just recently married Eddie Mallory, the band leader out of the Cotton Club, and he was trying to have his band get his name before the public, and so that he would become a popular big band leader. And the way they figured that they would do this by playing theaters, because they would be exposed to playing to more people. Theater would hold maybe, I don't have any idea what the seating capacity is, but I imagine it would be at least 500 or more people, and playing to them, and playing 4 and 5 and 6 shows a day. That would be a bigger exposure to the public than playing one-night dances here and there. And you had to play them with about 200 or 300 miles apart from different cities. You couldn't play them. But in the theater, we could go one place right to another, because the theater had a different clientele, and different people going to theaters were different from the people who would be coming to a dance. So anyhow, that was that incident, and so we went on from there. And then I know that after I played with that band for about a little over a year, we had no more incidents of that kind. So after I came home, came back to Columbus, I'm living in Columbus now, and I married my wife in 1938. I married my wife, and we were living in Columbus, Ohio. So I came back to Columbus, and we were just newlywed, and I played in Columbus for, one of the things that about being a musician, and it's a very important thing for any young person who has aspirations to play and travel with big bands. It's a very risky type of occupation. I mean by that, your health you put your health right on the line, and it can be very bad for your health, because you travel under all sorts of conditions, and you may not be properly prepared to meet the changes in the weather, climate changes. You do the best you can. And of course, this was time that I was traveling. This was during the Depression. And of course, I was very lucky. And this is the truth. I was very, very lucky because I have never gone with any band to work with them, but I didn't receive a decent salary. I didn't have the misfortune like many musicians have, who have gone out with bands and they played one-nighters, and sometimes they weren't paid. The crowds didn't turn up to hear the band, or the money that they drew was not very much, and they really went in the hole many times. But every time that I was with these bands that I worked with, we were playing them for theaters, and the money was guaranteed. And it was a union band. I had joined the union previous to this, so I didn't point that out. But this was all union musicians, and we were paid and guaranteed our pay. And I never had any financial problems, although I wasn't making a big salary or anything. I wasn't one of the highest paid, but I was well paid. I'll put it like that. I was probably paid as good as any black musician, including Duke Ellington and Cap Calloway, any of those guys. The difference in my pay and their pay was very, very slight. But what I'm saying, bring that into the fact that you still lived under some severe conditions. Like for instance, during that time, I first mentioned when I first started out was that I had quinsy and tonsillitis and had a very bad throat. Then I hadn't had my tonsils taken out during this time. So that was the main problem I had about my health, was my throat. So I was often sick with the flu. Back in those days they called it grip, and so it was kind of a thing where I had a lot of sickness. It depended on what kind of weather climate where I was living. It was easy for me to get a sore throat and have a problem. So my respiratory system was very, very bad. I didn't seem to be able to throw off them kind of threats. So the reason I bring that in is because I have all through my lifetime, right up until today, that's been my worst problem, is my throat and my respiratory system. And that's the main. Other than that, I've had good health. And right now, I have what they say, I have what you call a chronic bronchitis. And that is the thing that bothers my health, causes me more problems than anything else. Other than that, I've been pretty healthy. I have a little arthritis, but it's not real bad. Take a few pills and I'm okay. I can get along without complaining. But what I'm saying is the fact that you travel in these bands, it's a risk you take as a young musician, and if you don't take good care of yourself, why you're in for some trouble. And I was brought up by a Christian family. We had to go to Sunday school, we had to go to church, and my mother and father taught my brothers and sisters to know what was right and what was wrong in life. So we lived a very wholesome life, and a life that was religious sort of life. So I've always been that kind of a guy, and today my children are the same way. I have two of the finest sons a person could ever have. My oldest son is named after me, is Samuel W. Hopkins III, and my youngest son is William Grant Hopkins, and they are two of the finest young men that I wouldn't have ever wanted anybody, and very few I think that I would even know can mention anybody that comes up to their standard. Of course, I'm bragging a little bit, but it's the truth. They are two wonderful young men, and their families. They've given me grandchildren. I'm a great grandfather now, and I have a wonderful family, And all of it started with my father and mother, the background, and then before them, my ancestors. I had a great grandmother who lived to be 106 years old, and all of my grandparents and ancestors, they lived to be, most of them lived to be up in their 70s before they passed, and yet they didn't live under the very best of conditions that would be conducive to long life. But we did have about the average, law of average life around the age of 70 years of age, all of them. Like very few of them died before that period. So we were very fortunate in that sense. But the reason I brought that up is I just wanted to point out that I've been blessed with good health and happiness, and I was able to always have a place to sleep out of the weather, had shelter, had decent food, warm clothes, and all this. My family, my children, I've been very fortunate, and my wife and I being able to provide that type of home for my family. So anyhow, I wanted to go back just for a few moments to describe to you the type of band Eddie Mallory had with Ethel Waters. I didn't bring that out to very much. I was just talking about myself as a musician who was trying to live up to the standards and advancement of all those great musicians back in those days. This band, Eddie Mallory, was a band of, he had 4 trombones, he had 3 trumpets, that's a 7-piece brass section, and we had 4 saxes, which was sort of a thing that we had 4 saxes. We had one alto sax, that was me, and 2 tenor sax, and a baritone sax, 4 saxes. Now today, it's a common thing, if you have a large band, have a big band as we say, you have 5 saxes. All those bands. There's not of the brass section, there's sometimes as many as 8 or even 9-piece brass section. And of course you have the rhythm section. We had a 4-piece rhythm section. We had piano, bass, guitar, and drums. That was a normal rhythm section. What I wanted to say is that band was one of the finest bands that I've ever heard, and certainly that I ever played with. I was in New York City last year, and I went to hear at Lincoln Center the Duke Ellington concert, where they dedicated the whole concert. They played nothing but Duke Ellington's music, and I had become acquainted with several of the musicians on that show. And one of them spoke to me, and in fact 2 or 3 of them spoke to me and said that, Sam, that band that you played with back in the 30s, Eddie Mallory and his orchestra from the Cotton Club, was one of the great. See, there was only one band that was rated over and above your band. And I said, well, who was that? He said, it was Duke Ellington. He said, you were the 2nd best band in New York during that period. And I didn't know that at the time, and so I said, well, my goodness. And that was, to me, it really blown up my ego, because I knew the band was good, and it was just fantastic, but I didn't know that they had so much respect, so they were rated that high. 2nd only to Duke Ellington. And so anyhow, I played with that band for a little over a year, and every band that I played with, they were all good bands. I mean, Jimmy Rochelle was a good band. Chick Carter and his Dixie Rhythm Boys band, they were a good band. Zach White and his Chocolate Bowl Brummels, they were a good band. So I was playing in those days. You could not get a job in a band unless you were better than average musician. So because they were playing during the Depression and they could not make money, it wouldn't even be worthwhile if you couldn't get the very best musicians that you could possibly get, so that you could be comparable to these white bands. I mean, bands like Tommy Dorsey, Jimmy Dorsey, all the bands that were out there, Woody Herman, they were all top grade bands, and they had the best musicians. So that's what they had to do. They had to have the very best. And so to get into one of those bands would be comparable, just like a football player trying to get with the Cleveland Browns or trying to get with the Bengals. You have to be the best. or they wouldn't even look at you. They wouldn't listen to you. So that's the way it was. And so anyhow, I was very fortunate to be able to play with musicians of that caliber. So I have to say, without any excuses, I have to say that without any, I can't get the word that I want to say, but anyhow, that they were the musicians I played with all during my career. They have been the very best, top grade. And once you get into that circle, it's just a common thing for you to stay in that circle. You don't want to go down and play to inferior type of musicians, or you try to play with the best, because you know birds of a feather flock together. So you know that if you play with a good band, you're going to be successful. Well, now I want to say that during the time that I left the band, came back to Columbus, and with my family. My wife gave me 2 sons. They're like I just said, two of the finest young people that I know anywhere. Not just because they were my sons. And I would like to say this, that they have been inspired by me, and they both have always think about my career and everything. And I'm doing this tape. I'm being taped right now by my oldest son, who's an English major in college, and he's a school teacher and a student counselor at Beechcroft High School here in Columbus. And he is responsible for me trying to make this little autobiography of myself. He has been working on me to come and do this, and I've been stalling. It's been going on for over a year or more. So finally we're trying to get together now, and I'm trying to make sure that I don't make too many errors in trying to get this thing together. And then the other boy is, he played in one of my bands. I had several bands while I was working in Columbus. I had several small combos, 4 and 5 pieces, that size band. Then sometimes 8 or 9 pieces. And Billy, my youngest son, played trumpet. He took up trumpet. Sam took up trumpet too, the oldest boy, but he got more interested in his athletic life. He was a baseball player in college, basketball player in college, and I don't think he got much into the football field, but he was strictly excellent basketball player and excellent baseball player. Very, very good. And he played with college teams that he went to school at. And he is now coaching at on the high school level. He had baseball teams and basketball teams in the high school level in Columbus here. And he's coaching now at one of the high schools here. I think it's the name of this school is Bishop Hartley, yeah, Bishop Hartley High School. He's coaching over there. And he has 2 sons, just like I did. He got 2 sons, and they're both excellent athletes. And I'm just telling you that just a little bit about my family. Now, all this came about, and we've been very, very happy as a family. And it came about through the blessings of God, because God has really blessed me, and it's come about through the teachings of my ancestors, my parents, and my grandparents, and all the people before them. They always taught us how to take care of our responsibilities and not to get in any kind of trouble. Try to live a clean life, take care of our bodies, and be thankful for everything that we had. So therefore, I think that's been the focus of my whole life, so that it has been our good fortune to be able to make it through, and as we go right now, without any real tragic or serious thing. Although the most serious was my oldest son's oldest boy. He has recovered from cancer. He's had a brain cancer, and he's had an operation, and been through an awful lot. And when he was 12 years old, now he's now 19 years old and going to college over here in Dayton at the Wright State University. so that just shows you how we come along as a family. And Bill is got to be a very, very successful businessman. That's my youngest son. He at one time has owned 18 Wendy's old-fashioned hamburgers, and he since has sold and then is now retired from business, but he's living in San Diego and La Jolla, California. But now away from the family, I'll get back to my career. This Eddie Mallory band we didn't have 4 saxes, but we had three men who double on saxophone in the band that gave us a seven-man sax section, and we used that just for specialties. They didn't play with the full band, but we did specialties like on different ballads. 7 saxophones, the most beautiful thing you ever want to hear. Sounds like a pipe organ, and it was amazing. It was just that's almost like using expression of musicians. I blew my wig when the experience of playing and listening to these guys blow, and all good musicians. And 7 saxophones, that gave me the idea of and I don't know. Well, they have been all during the years. There have been different sized brass sections with trumpets or trombones or string sections, different size groups. And there have been saxophone sections, sections like the Shep Fields, where he had all saxophones in the rhythm section, had a band of that type. So anyhow, I had the idea of forming me a band of 7 saxophones to play with the rhythm section. That's piano, bass, and drums. And I never really got to it. We rehearsed it and wrote a lot of music, but we never really sat it down and got into it. But it was the most rewarding experience I think that I've had as far as playing and it's something that's different in the use of saxophones. But anyhow, this band, Eddie Mallory, we did play a dance, one dance down in Mississippi, and it was a tremendous experience. The band was absolutely flawless. They played a tune. They didn't miss any notes. Everything was absolutely perfect, and it was a great thrill. Well, after I came back home in 1939, like I said, I played with some local bands here. They were all good. And then I was doing defense work. I become a welder, arc welder, in a defense plant. And I told my wife's name was Mildred Allen. I married her when she was working as a waitress in a Chinese restaurant. And we fell in love, we got married. And like I said, she gave me these 2 fine sons. But I told her, now I said, I've been back away from these big bands, and you know that is my heart. There's no other type of work. I didn't go to college. There's no other type of work that I love and I'm happy with other than the band business. So she said, yeah, I know, I realize that. So I said, well, now, been thinking a few days about going back with a big band. She said, you are? And I said, yeah, I would like to if it's okay with you. She said, well, okay, go ahead. So sure enough, I got an offer to go with a band out of New York, and it was a very, very fine band. Lucky Millender from the Savoy Ballroom in New York, played the Apollo Theater dozens of times, and he was a well-established band in New York, and we played all over the United States. So I joined his band, and it was a unique experience for me because during the time that I was with him, about a year and maybe 2-3 months, he had a lot of turnover in the band. He was he had a lot of ideas about wanting to change musicians and sounds of the band, so he would change every now and then and would hire and then let some other musicians go. And they would be, not exactly say fired, but they would quit or they would just leave on their own. And he would replace them. And so at one time we had 8 white musicians and 7 black musicians. So I came to work one night, and the guy said, "Sam, look up there on the bandstand." Said, "We're outnumbered." And I looked up there and I had to laugh. But they were all great musicians, all these guys. Of course, any band out of New York, if you're a big band, traveling band, you don't leave New York, you don't go to New York and play in New York, and you don't leave New York to travel out here throughout the United States unless you're a very excellent band. Because if you don't have an excellent band, you'll starve. The people, you just won't sell. So this band, Lucky Miller's had at one time had 8 white musicians, and then 7 black musicians. It was one of the best, also one of the best bands to come out of New York. And he had about 3 or 4 arrangers to wrote the music, and he had a style that was sort of similar to a Glenn Miller band. We had the Glenn Miller style sound reed section where we used clarinet on top, and we had the reed section was 2 alto sax, 2 tenor sax, and a baritone sax. And all the men played clarinets. Everybody played clarinets. So we had quite a fine reed section. And then the brass section was equally fine. We had the men that had played with Duke's band and Cab's band and come out of them bands and played with Lucky Milner. So we had musicians from all the top bands like around there. At the time when somebody else was laying off, not working, Lucky would hire me to put him in his band, because Lucky worked just almost constantly. He was playing theater work, almost 100% theater work. And so the band was a tremendous band, and we did a lot of broadcasting. We broadcast coast to coast from Savoy Ballroom, and we had a marvelous band. I enjoyed that band probably more or as much as any band I ever played with, because we did so many. I recorded more with that band than ever any other band. Now with Ethel Waters, I did a few recordings with her, but it wasn't with the band. It was with her. She did some records for Decca Recording Company, and she was singing numbers like "I'll Get Along Somehow" or "You a Sweetheart," numbers like that. The proper hit tunes back in the late 30s and early 40s. So anyhow, that band was mostly, the recording work was mostly with Miss Waters, Ethel Waters. But now with Lucky Milner's band, his recording work was mostly the whole band, featuring the whole band, and we did all kind of variety. He had classical arrangements like on Rhapsody in Blue, and compositions from some of the most well-known classical composers like Rachmaninoff and George Gershwin, like Rhapsody in Blue, and numbers like that. So he loved to have his band play that type of music. And I remember one time we were playing in New York just before I left that band, and we played. It's the only time I ever witnessed it or heard a big band, stop a show. I'm sure that anybody that goes to see stage shows or to see a show, a concert where you have a show, a variety show, you have certain acts in that show that succeed in doing what we call stopping the show. In other words, they will receive so much applause and recognition from the audience that's so appreciative of their performance that the show comes to a complete halt while while the public is urging them to play another number, please play another song. The applause gets larger and larger, bigger and bigger. So anyhow, that happened with this number. We played the Rachmaninoff's concerto in B flat minor, I believe it was, where the melody of Full Moon and Empty Arms was prominent. It became a popular tune, and that was taken from that composition of his concerto, Rachmaninoff. And anyhow, when we played that number, we stopped the show. We received so much applause, and we completely stopped the show. We were playing Apollo Theater, so that had never I had never experienced it, and then playing in the band that did it, that was even more satisfying. So, but along with that, that band being, like I say, the Lucky Milliner was a colorful guy. He was a guy that had gotten into the band business through being a sort of a handyman type of a thing. They told me a boy would run errands for Al Capone, gangster. This is true, in Chicago. And he used to travel, like go from club to club in Chicago, and while they were there, he took care of the needs of Al Capone or Ralph Capone brothers. And any of the guys in the group, they'd go into a club, like maybe they'd have 25 or 30 people in their company, and they'd go in a show and go into a club to see a show, and they'd take over quite a bit of the seating. And these Lucky Milliner was one of the sort of errand boys for that group, and so they would have him to go get this, go get that, do this, do that. So we were told that I was told that Lucky got into the show business by this. This is what happened. Al Capone and his group of people were in a club where Hopkins, not Erskine Hopkins, I'm sorry, it wasn't Erskine Hopkins, delete that. But it was Frank, no it wasn't Frank. I can't, well, let's see, I've lost the name. I'm getting, to the age now, I'm getting kind of Alzheimer's disease, I guess, where you forget things that you had on your tongue intended to say. But the band leader that had the band was playing in this club where they were in the audience, Al Capone. They were, it was quite a band, one of the best known bands in Chicago. And that's the name of the band, of course, it don't have to be recorded as me mentioning that. I'll just say that this band was one of the best well-known bands in Chicago. So one of the guys said, "Hey, Lucky," and said, how would you like to have that band? You think you could conduct and direct that band?" He said, "Sure." And of course, Lucky was a guy that would take on anybody. And that's one reason why he had that name Lucky, because he was a gambler, he liked to gamble, he liked to brag about himself, and so he was capable of accomplishing anything and do it well. So sure enough, they told him, said, "Well, I'll tell you what you do." Al Capone, or one of the Capone boys, brothers, said, "Go up there and tell that guy, ask him how much does he want for his band, and I want to tell him we want to buy the band." And now the name comes to me. The name was Erskine Tate. It was Erskine Tate in his famous talk group. So he came back, told him, said, "Yeah, he wants certain things. Well, tell him to come over here." So Erskine Tate came over to the table, sat down, and they negotiated right there and then a deal to buy the band. And then they said, "Now go ahead, now the band is yours. You got it." So that's the way he got started in the big band business. And that's what to say is true. I don't know. But that's what I was told. I have no reason to disbelieve it, because he was he was a young kid out of Alabama, Birmingham, Alabama. He came up to Chicago and got into that type of life, and got into he was with Al Capone. In fact, he looked like Al Capone. He looked like an Italian boy. He was a light-skinned guy, and he looked like an Italian. And he looked like you might say a black Eddie G. Robinson. That's who exactly Lucky Milliner looked like. He was a good likeness to Eddie G. Robinson. So anyhow, he was into the band business now. So then a few years later, he became well known as a band leader, and made a lot of records. Some of them were big hits. Notably, "I Love You, Yes I Do." That was written, composed by one of his musicians, trumpet player. It was in the band during the time I was in the band. His name was Henry Glover. Henry Glover wrote "I Love You, Yes I Do," and it was recorded by Tommy Dorsey and a lot of the big white bands. They played that tune, and it was a big hit all over the country. "I Love You, Yes I Do." So anyhow, going on, I joined Hopkins band, and I remember one incident where we were playing in Boston, and the band was playing a special show to honor a lady who was in the audience who had written and composed a very beautiful ballad called "Someday," and the band had recorded that ballad. And so we played that and dedicated to her. She was in the audience, and she got a big round of applause. But the reason why I'm telling you about this is a one unusual thing. It don't happen all the time, and very seldom, if any time other than this at all. And what happened was that the arrangement started out with the ensemble, the band ensemble playing 2 bars, and the piano player would come in and play the next 2 bars. And they alternated like that until they completed 8 bars. Band played 2 bars. Piano player played 2 bars solo. Band played 2 bars. Piano player played the last 2 bars solo. That made up 8 bars. And at which time the singer would come to the mic in front of the stage, and he would sing his song. And he had a voice similar to Frank Sinatra. But during this time, when we played the band ensemble, we were starting all over. Now we start with the band playing, and Lucky gives a downbeat, and the band hits the whole entire band. The ensemble plays 2 bars. And then Lucky points and gives a signal for the man operating the spotlights to move over to the piano player, and the piano player would have the spotlight. And when he did that, the piano player got up and walked off the stage. Now we don't have a piano player to play that. We don't have nothing going there. We did not prepare for this. This is a complete surprise to everybody. So we were just dumbfounded, and it was just like everybody looked around. What are we going to do? It's 4 bars. I mean, we played an 8-bar introduction, and then 2 bars. There's 4 bars. There's not going to be anything in it, but just silence. So the drummer was playing wire brushes, and he kept on going with his wire brushes. And the audience didn't react to it. Didn't nobody react to anything unusual. We just ignored it. And he got up and walked off the stage. Now I don't know whether he had some kind of a problem, or he had some kind of a personal problem with himself, where he had to go. Sometimes he said, when you got to go, you got to go. But anyhow, he got up and left. And and we got through that thing, and it was okay. But after that, I never asked anybody. I never asked the piano player why he got up. I never. Those days, those kind of bands, you got along best if you tended to your own business. You didn't have to be, knowing and inquiring and getting curious about everything that's going on. So that was just one of this I thought was sort of an unusual thing. I just mentioned that. But anyhow, all during my career in the big bands, things like that would be happening, and it would just be something that was unusual. And one of the things that I think was unusual is the fact that I played with some of the best musicians, black or white, in the United States during that period of time when I was traveling. They were all same class musicians, all great musicians. I could have played with anybody's band. And even now, not to be bragging by myself, I was not too far behind any of them. I could play with any of them, and I was offered a job to play with them. So I'm not bragging or anything like that, I'm just telling you the truth. I had practiced and studied hard on my instrument, so I was a good musician. And I've been told that by some of my friends who are right out there right today. So I have tried to carry myself and tried to be a kind of guy that the guys would accept and would go right along, and everything would be just fine, as long as you take care of your responsibilities. That's my philosophy of life, is to do your best, give whatever you do, give it your best shot, and do your best. And anyhow, we sort of took a little break. In the meantime, I picked up a magazine over to the newspaper store, and it's a new jazz journal, it's called. And it's got history of different musicians, the world's greatest jazz musicians. And so I thought I'd look through it and see what's happening, because I haven't been able to, I don't know if the downbeat used to be the official musician's Bible. I don't know if that's still in existence or not. I don't know whether they're still publishing it or not. So I happened to see this magazine called Jazz Journal. So I bought a copy of it, and it seems to be very interesting. It covers a lot of the original recordings of some of the old timers, and it's really a nice reading matter. Anyhow, I was talking about when I first left Richmond, and I was talking about my first girlfriend. I think as we were going into this period of high school period, and just wanted to bring out the fact that I was my girlfriend's first boyfriend, and she was my first girlfriend. Her name was Lucy Spears. And it's an odd thing, unusual thing, that we separated when I was about 18 years old after graduating from high school, and I never saw her no more for approximately a little more than 60 years. Meantime, during that time that we were separated, absent from each other, she had married, and she had 4 children. And I had gotten married, and I think I've mentioned this before, but anyhow, I just wanted to say what a blessing I've had in my lifetime, and the blessings that I received, and I want to try to sort of elaborate on those blessings. That God has been good to me, my family has been good to me, and we've had a lot of happiness. And so during the time that we were together and separated, Lucy had her family and I had my family, and we never got together anymore for approximately, like I just said a few moments ago, for about 60 years. And during that time, a lot has happened. Different bands that I played with in my early years, and enjoyed the experiences and learning that I got from being associated with some very fine musicians. Like I said before, the very best. And I never had any hardship financially, really, because I learned to live with the times and not to overspend or overindulge in anything. I was very conservative when it come down to my lifestyle. And as a result of being conservative and having a good family training from my mother and father, I have enjoyed pretty good health. And I can say that I have been well satisfied and well blessed with the good things that come to me in the way of financial and way of association and friends and my family and all that type of thing. It's been beautiful. And my 2 sons, I got to really thank them, and of course my wife, I got to thank her more than anybody else, because she insisted upon my sons getting a college education, both of them. Then she insisted on us, she and I, to buy property, real estate property, and that was the basis of my being able to retire at age 62, when the band business was absolutely changed from what it had been, and I had gotten older. I'm 62 years old when I retired, so that all the things that we had done as a young married couple was very, very helpful to my present condition now, which I'm very happy to say, not to brag or anything, that I don't have any real problems, financial or health-wise. Just like any ordinary average person, I've had a very, very good life and a happy life. And they say, as they say, that one of the secrets of longevity is to be happy. And if I can just keep that up, and be lucky enough to keep up my happiness and enjoy my life as it is, and enjoy the happiness that goes along with a good life, maybe I'll live to be 100 years old. I know that's my ambition. After I accomplish these other ambitions, like playing in big bands and traveling with famous musicians and all that sort of thing. Now my next goal is to live to be 100 years of age. And that comes to people that say, who are a result of the lifestyle, they are happy with them, with their friends and their surroundings, environment and all that. And I have all that. And I think that life is, like I said, I think I mentioned it, that life is, to me, it's not a complicated thing if you just stick to some of the most simple things that comes natural to you in your happiness, in your pursuit of happiness and your happy life together. You must have a companion who is together and believes in everything that you believe in, and then you have to work together and cooperate with each other and love each other. So I've had all that. And so there, I want to go on with what I think has been meaningful to me in my life, and that is the fact that I can start with the place that I live now in Columbus, a neighborhood of wonderful neighbors who all people of very high lifestyles, professional, and they are very, very fine people, as a whole group of us. And it comes from a neighborhood of about 20 or more, 21 or 2 maybe houses, residential houses, and they all have different types of lifestyles. Some of them are lawyers, some of them are doctors. I'm one of the few musicians, and all walks of life in this neighborhood, and so everybody's congenial, and they live a prosperous life. But it's not anything difficult for a person who is having maybe some kind of a problem. You got to look back at your life and say to yourself, what have I done that, like you often hear people say, what have I done that brings this bad luck to my family or my children? If you haven't done anything real bad, maybe you can be just as lucky as I am and fortunate as I am, which I don't think I've done anything real bad. I've been doing the best I could, and yet I have tasted all the good things about living, but I never indulged or overindulged in anything. I've been conservative, taking care of my health, taking care of my family, paying my bills, and trying to make a decent living. So that's what I say is the main ingredients for a person to be able to make it in this world. That makes for the whole thing. It just does it. And as I go go along, I think about the times that I have enjoyed with the neighbors. Think about the times that I've enjoyed with my whole life, and I think that God has really blessed me, and I am so happy. And I hope that my sons realize that I love them, and both of them are just I'm indebted to them. They have taken care of my wife, their mother, and they have worked hard, both of them, and accomplished everything that we wanted them to do. They went to college and got their degrees. Samuel, my oldest son, has got his master's degree, and I think he's taken on so many things now. He's a devout father and a husband to 2 fine sons, and they have grown up to be 2 very promising young men. The oldest boy is just recovered a few years back from cancer, and God has been with us there because He spared this young boy's life. He was hit by cancer when he was only 12 years old, and now he is 19 years old and going to Wright State University and doing real well in school. And the youngest boy is 17 years old, and he's doing real well in sports. He's a starting player on the St. Charles Catholic School high school basketball team. He's one of the starting players, and he's very good at it. And I saw him play the other night, and he scored all kind of shots and very good in offense. He's an outstanding athlete on the team. So that shows you that we've done a lot of things right. So these boys have come up and we're proud of them. But I just want to pat them on the back, and I thank my friends, and I thank my family, all way back to go back to my mother and father and my grandparents and all. I've had a happy life, and that's the reason why I'm happy, is because I really haven't had anything real bad any more than any other family. Like, well, everybody has tragedies and sorrowful things when it comes up to your family life. People in your family die, and maybe you have some financial problems, but you go out of it. You learn how to take care and beat those problems and deal with them, and you go right along with life. So that's the one thing that I've been thankful for, is to have a world of common sense, and my wife and I, and we've got along just fine. To where we've gone all down through the years, and I've traveled with bands and had a happy experience with playing and traveling all over the United States. And coming back to Columbus, lived in my life, and I worked with the city treasurer's office and as a cashier, and then I retired at age 62. And I've enjoyed the family life of my mother and father, all my friends. I played golf and have done well in sports. As far as myself is concerned, I've been an avid golfer, and I've won many trophies for my abilities to play golf, as well as being a musician. So I've had a good life, and we were able to save and work and save, pay our bills, and get some investment property, which we finally disposed of a few years back, and reinvested into certificates of deposit. And so we try to keep them, and I try to keep them, and not to cash them in. I try to use them investments to help me supplement my retirement income, and it's been very good for me. So that's all it is in life. If you just use them simple plans in your life, work, get you a good job that you can be satisfied with, have a good life together as a family, teach your children the right and wrong, go to school, and take care of your responsibilities as a member of the city, as a member of the citizen of the city in which you live, and teach your children how to do the same thing. And then we sort of believe that everybody should have a fair chance of believing in God, and treat everybody as you want them to treat you. You treat them as the way you want to be treated, and then we can get along as a people. And then, of course, this country is really a remarkable, and it's really the best country in the world, because it gives everybody a chance to do that. Now, whether you do it or not, that's up to you as an individual. But I can say this, that my life as a musician and as a neighborhood person, and a person who has worked in the community to try to accomplish what you have to do as a sort of a teamwork type of thing, it's been very, very happy with my respect. But going back to the band days now, I've talked enough about that sort of thing, and I'd like to say that the band life was just as you say, as you make it. You can go out here in life and be a musician, or you can be in some other livelihood or some other type of work. And if you do what is expected of you, do your best, you eliminate all the problems that a lot of people have who are really don't give it their best shot. So in playing with all these different bands and musicians, I've always tried to keep a good relationship, get along with everybody, and treat everybody right, and then they respect you, and you have no problems with being with people who you work with, or live with, or play with, or have fun with, or go to church with, or be a neighbor to. You have a common relationship, which is leads to happiness as a family, and then as you go into twilight years of your life, you can look back and recall some of your old friends. Like, for instance, I often go take a trip to New York and see some of my old buddies. There's not too many of them alive. Now they're all mostly passed on. But we've had a wonderful, wonderful relationship with different musicians, like I say. And I see these young musicians, they all come and say hello, and we cross each other's paths and talk about old times. And I know that some of the bands that are out there now, there's not too many of them, big bands, but they keep up the tradition, and the musicians are wonderful. Like the Ellington band is still going, Count Basie Parker's still going, and I often see them, like we had them to play for our 50th wedding anniversary, Count Basie's orchestra, and it was a wonderful experience. So the things that I think about oftentimes is some of the funny things that happen in playing with those bands. Some of the musicians or some of the guys would sort of. I remember one time I was playing with a band that mentioned way back in this beginning of this little interview, my story, live story here, where one of the guys was, he was kind of a, well, I wouldn't say he's conceited, but he was kind of a proud type of musician. He liked to dress well, and he liked to, he liked to make friends with girls and all that type of thing. He's a normal person. Remember, the guy said, we're going to have a little fun out of him. His name was Walter Hubbard, trumpet player, wonderful trumpet player. He's from New Orleans, a Creole, they call him, down in New Orleans. And he played a wonderful musician, so he had a liking to meet the pretty girls and all that type of thing. So we played a trick on him. We decided to, we were up in Benton Harbor, I beg your pardon, we were in Jackson City, Michigan. Jackson City, Michigan, and we were playing at a summer resort. And so we decided to write letters and pretend that these letters came from one of his admirers that he would see every night as we would go to work and play. He would sort of maybe have a little flirtation with a lady, a young lady, and she was attractive. And so he thought that she was the one that was writing him these letters, so he become infatuated with her. So we planned it so that he would meet her one night after we got through playing, and had all the plans, and he changed clothes and got dressed and was to meet her down the road. It's kind of a little highway outside the short distance from where we were playing in this nightclub. So he was to meet this girl. She had their signals all fixed up so that he would stand out there and wave them down as she passed by in the car, and she would stop, and then they'd get together. So, but the night that it just so happens that the night they were to get together, we had it planned that way. It was a real bad night. It was raining and storming. So he had on his light, beautiful light suit, had a straw hat on, and he had his white shoes, and he was really sharp. Boy, he was really proud. So he went out there and stood on the side of the road, and this is true now, I'm not kidding, this is all true. And it poured down rain and just running, he got soaking wet, and no girlfriend showed up. Well, he waited about maybe a half an hour or so, and then she never did show up, so he then decided to come on back in and give it up. And then 2 or 3 days later, we told him we had played that joke on him, and he was ready to kill all of us. But that was some of the things the guys were always trying to cook up something to have some fun. And but we had a marvelous band. That band was very, very good. This was back in the late 30s, about 1937, and we played in Detroit. And we were the first black bands to play in the Book Cadillac Hotel, which was a very famous place in Detroit. And so we played there at the Book Cadillac Hotel with a band out of England. Jack Hilton was the band leader, and he had they called him the White Duke Ellington. And he had probably about a 30-piece orchestra. They had 2 harp players, he had big string sections, and they had a regular brass and reeds and rhythm section. So it was a big orchestra. And we were to play alternating. He was to play in one ballroom, and we would play in another ballroom. We call them twin ballrooms. And they played their first set And then we come in and played our first set. And after the people heard us, they wouldn't go back to his ballroom, so they quit. They only played about 1 or 2 sets, and then they quit and just folded up the instrument, and we finished out the dance. Our band was, I guess they liked our music better, the people did, and so we were really honored, and we were sort of happy about that. And then shortly, a few days later, we played it wasn't exactly a battle, but we were a guest band and played with Paul Whiteman. And he was well known then, and he was called the King of Jazz. This is about 1937. And we played against him. And we came off with flying colors. And we did so well with those 2 engagements, the Detroit Bookers, it was called a booking agency called Ray Gorell, and he had 2 or 3 well-known bands back in the 30s, and one of them was Nathaniel Skillcat. And he had bands like Jimmy Dorsey and Tommy Dorsey and all them bands would come through there, they would book them. So we were so well liked that they had McKinney's Cotton Pickers had a bad accident and killed about 4 of their men, so their band broke up. And so we were lucky enough to be chosen to play out the rest of it band's McKinney's Cotton Pickers engagement, bookings throughout the Midwest. And so we played under the name of McKinney's Cotton Pickers for about a week or so, and finished up those contracted dates that they had been booked in the McKinney's Cotton Pickers. So anyhow, we did real well for ourselves. Then we went on back to Columbus, and we traveled and then played different various dates, and we played a band from Cincinnati, Jack White's band, one of the first bands that I played with. He asked our band to help him out. He was in a pinch because he lost a lot of his musicians too. It was during the Depression times in the 30s. So our band was doing pretty well, and we kept on going. We made a nice appearance. We had new uniforms, new instruments, and the guys were, like I said, were great musicians. One of the guys, I think he's still playing with Johnny Carson's Tonight Show band, Doc Severson. His name was Snooky Young, a trumpet player. That's the kind of musicians that we played with, and that boy is making a lot of money now. He's a wonderful trumpet player, and he's what you call the first trumpet player in the solos with the Doc Severson's band. Well, anyhow, those was the type of bookings that we had. So we went on and played those kind of dates, and then finally we come to the time to where we were going on like I said, to help this Jack White band by replacing him with our band to play some dates that he couldn't fulfill. And we started out in Buffalo, New York, and it was cold in December. It was right close to the New Year's Eve holiday. So we went up there, and he gave us a bus to use so that our transportation costs wouldn't be too big. And by George, he gave us a bus. It was very bad. I mean, we didn't have no heat in the bus, and the thing broke down. We didn't get on that job in time. We had to make up all kind of excuses because we were late. We didn't get in to play the job. Never did play the job. We were supposed to play like on a Friday night. We didn't get there till Saturday night. So we were in trouble with the union. But we talked out of that, and to make things worse, we got by, and I don't remember whether we got fined or not, but I don't think we did because of the hardship of the thing. And so we were supposed to take our tour, which would carry us down to Indiana and on up to Chicago during the holidays, the New Year's Eve holidays. So we were, by taking this job and trying to help this guy out, it caused us to miss about 2 or 3 of our first dates, and that put us in more hot water. Anyhow, that was really a terrible thing that happened, and it happened. A lot of bands would have breakdowns, but we still lived through it, and we still was able to deal with it. And ended up, we played in Chicago, played at a big nightclub up there with like Earl Hines, and equivalent to the type of place that he would play. We played in the nightclub. I think it was it might have been the Grand Terrace, I'm not sure, but we played there for I think about 3 nights. And then we came on out there and came back to Columbus, and Then when our band broke up, because we were out of work for about a month or so, so we broke up. So I came on back to Columbus, and then shortly after that, I had a chance and offer to go with the Eddie Mallory band, who was at that time married to Ethel Waters, and we went on a theater tour, and we played nothing but theaters. And in that band, I think I mentioned that before, we had some great musicians in that band. Tyree Glenn was on trombone. He was one of the great trombone players in those big bands. He played with Cab Calloway, he played with Duke, and so on and so forth. And then we had another boy that played tenor sax. He was Don Bias, and he was one of the greatest jazz tenor players of those back in the 30s and 40s. He made, I don't know, he made hundreds of records. And he ended up, he went to Europe and played in Paris, played in Belgium, played in Germany, all over, and in Sweden. He was one of the great musicians of his time, Don Bias. He was from Texas. Then I played with that band, Eddie Mallory's band. We played a number of theaters all over the United States. We played the Apollo Theater probably about half a dozen times. Then I came on back home because my wife then had our first son. Sammy was born in 1939, and so we went on from there. And then Billy was born in 1942, and that was my second son. So they went on, and then we just about my big band temporarily had come to a halt because there was a war on, and I got a defense job as a welder. Now I'm a musician, and I played with all these good musicians and everything. I ended up in the war by being an arc welder in the defense plant, welding on Navy chains, anchor chains, and the bomb casings for 1,000-pound blockbuster bomb casings. I played and it was still playing in that. Then organized my own group. I had about a 5 or 6 piece band, sometimes 8 piece band, and I was playing around Columbus, Ohio, in some of the clubs around Columbus. And doing that, one night I never will forget this. I was playing up at the Club Regal with Al Freeman's band. Al Freeman's got a son. He never got a chance to see his son as he become a movie star. And Al is known as Al Freeman Jr. Now he's in a whole lot of movies now at the present day, and his father died before he had a chance to see his son perform in the movies. Al Freeman Sr. But Al Freeman Jr. is, like I said, a prominent black movie star. He was he played in this new movie, Malcolm X. He was, I think he was I'm kind of back on my people's titles and all that type of thing, but he played the part of Muhammad, the top Muhammad religious person. He was the head of it. And Malcolm X, I think, not Malcolm X, but I mean his Muhammad, can't think what his name was. But anyhow, he was Malcolm X's leader. And so anyhow, these people were this is part of my life to come into that, and I come through the defense work just during the war. And so Al had jobs like we played all over Columbus during the war, and we played different little clubs and nightclubs and all like that. And so I played with Al for about up until 1945, and the war came to an end, I think, in 1946. So at that time, I quit the defense job, and I told my wife that I was going to join another big band. This would probably be my last chance to play in a big band. So I did. I joined Lucky Milliner's band. And then I spoke about Lucky's band. We were in Boston when the piano player got up and walked off the stage. Well, this is where I am now. I'm talking about Lucky Milliner's band in 1945 and 46. So I played with him for about a year, a little more. And then I came on back to Columbus. Like I say, I've got 2 sons now. They were just little fellas. Just starting out, hadn't even gone to elementary school. They're just aged about maybe about 4 and 6 years old, about 2 years difference in their age. So they were coming along, and I was done giving up traveling and playing with these big bands, so I had my own band right along about that time, and so during that time I met Nancy Wilson. She was starting out as a singer in Columbus clubs, and so I had her. I engaged her. She sang in my band at Club Regal. That was Columbus, one of Columbus' top black nightclubs. And she sang with my band, and another a white girl. We had a black singer. That was Nancy Wilson. And we had a white girl singer, and her name was Jerry Parker. And they both worked us on weekends at the Regal. Now here I am playing at the Regal now with my own group, and Nancy Wilson was there. They would come in and play, and this other girl, Jerry Parker, they would come in and entertain and sing with the band on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Now, one Friday night, one of the waitresses was having was married to a guy that came in the club, and he got in an argument. Her husband got in an argument with a fellow who pulled his gun, and one of the head waitresses, name was Frida Atkins. She said, "Sam, come over quick. Come here quick. This man's got a gun." And before I could get over there, this fellow shot him, and he was one of the local, not say pedestrian, but I say one of the local clients that used to come up to Regal and sit and socialize at the Regal bar there. And so he shot this poor young man, this girl's husband. She was a waitress, and he almost died, but he made it. And anyhow, that went on. That was one of the things. And I had to stand there and take this man's gun who shot this boy. So Sam, the bartender, came over and he held this boy. He was bleeding, had a wound under his, had been shot under his heart. And so I took his gun hand and pulled it down to his side, and I said, he held him about 3, 4, 5 seconds, and I said, "Now put your gun away." And he, just like a little child, he minded me, he obeyed me, and put his gun in his holster. And I said, "Now let's go to the office." And we went on to the office, and that was the end of that. I never heard any more about it. No investigation. Nobody asked me any questions. I wasn't interviewed by a policeman or anybody. Because that was another thing. But like I say, a lot of times, you don't see nothing, you don't hear nothing, you don't talk, you don't ask questions. And that's one of my way of life. I've always done that. I tend to my business, and let things work out, and they'll work out the best way, some kind of way, without causing a whole lot of trouble for anybody. So anyhow, I went on, and from that time on, I had my own band, and I had all kind of opportunities to play all over the country and play. And I never got with any more big bands, but I played on very, very outstanding jobs with my band, and I met a lot of musicians. And one night I was playing at the Regal, and I didn't know it, who this fellow was, but he was in town with a band from Kansas City. Of course, Kansas City musicians at that time were well known throughout the United States in the jazz world, because a lot of your best jazz entertainers or jazz musicians came from Kansas City. And this fellow came up, and he was with a band who was not working, but it was kind of came to Columbus to work, and they were laid off. They hadn't been playing, so he had an off night. So he came up there and started to sit in with us, and we often had to, invite musicians to come sit in and have a jam session. So he took out his saxophone, and he played 2, 3 notes, and he was warming up, playing 2, 3 phrases, and he put his instrument back in his case and then walked on out. I didn't know what his trouble was, but I didn't think. I said, well, maybe he'd gotten high or something. It was too high. Didn't feel like he wanted to play. So I never bothered him. Just let it go on to that. So about the next night, he came up again and started the same procedure. Took out his horn, played a few phrases, put his horn back up. And so anyhow, all during that period of time, a lot of musicians came in. They'd be in town, playing downtown in Columbus, or in the hotels, or one-nighters or something of that type, or playing by the week downtown, some job or some hotel. And I would meet a lot of the outstanding musicians like Roy Eldridge, and like Chris Connors, a singer who was singing with Benny Goodman, all that kind of band. They come up and entertained at the Regal, and we had Babs Gonzalez. He came to the Regal and entertained up there, and we had Sonny Stitt, a famous saxophone player, one of the greatest. He came up there at the Regal, and I worked with all of the people. But this boy, I found out about 2 or 3 years later who this guy was that had taken out his saxophone and didn't play. And he did that 2 nights and never attempted to play for some reason or other. He just didn't decide when he wanted to play. So I found out who he was. I was telling Benny Carter had come to town. You know, Benny Carter was one of the greatest, all-time greatest black musicians. He had his own band. He played in a ballroom right across the street from Club Regal, right there on Long Street. So I went up over to hear him on my break, and I listened to Benny's. Boy, he was marvelous. I asked Benny to play a special request for me. I said, Benny, you know, I've heard this recording by Coleman Hopkins on Body and Soul, and I said, that's the greatest recording I've ever heard as an instrumentalist on an individual musician. He said, yeah, that was great. So I said, Benny, how about playing me some Body and Soul? Because I know Benny was as great as anybody when come out and living and playing soul, jazz solos, and he was a marvelous musician and still is today. And he's up in his 80s. So he played some Body and Soul. He played me about 20 courses. And it was so, I said, I don't want to hear Coleman Hawkins anymore. He played so much horn that he just made everybody else sound like you wouldn't want to hear them anymore. Because he played such a great performance. So he played about 15, 20 courses of Body and